We hear it all the time. You need to be chasing stability rather than numbers. And we hear people say this in all the Facebook groups, and there's videos about it and all of that stuff. But how do we actually achieve stability in a reef tank? It's been said that chasing perfection is the enemy of awesomeness, and I completely agree. And in our tanks, that's exactly what the situation is. If you start trying to dial into exactly perfect sets of numbers, you might be shooting yourself in the foot where you could otherwise have a very nice, very thriving tank, but you keep changing things around and that just keeps everything suppressed just a little bit. So let's talk about when and how we actually start getting to the point of achieving stability in our tanks. This was originally at the end of the video, but I wanted to bring it in and say it now as an example. You could set up two 40-gallon breeder aquariums right next to each other. Same tank, same stand, same light, same filtration. We'll call it a sump. Same skimmers, same filter socks, same return pumps, same sand, same rocks, okay? Literally identical setups. Fill them both up, get them salty, same salt, cycle them both the same way, and then you do this tank, no fish, very few cleaners, and all SPS corals. This tank over here, right off the rip, there's fish in the tank, you're doing a mixed reef. These two tanks are going to stabilize at different rates and require different adjustments to get each one of them stable. Okay? When you're trying to attack this problem, there is no A, B, C, D to reach stability in your aquarium. There's a general mindset and a general thought guideline that you want to take yourself along. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. But it's not a recipe where you can say, do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this, and boom, your tank will be stable. It doesn't work like that. So let's talk about it. You have to build the tank right from the beginning. I've often said that these things are ecosystems, and the life of our tanks begins at the nitrogen cycle. Not rushing this process, not using a bunch of chemicals to get yourself through this process, and letting this take the time that it needs to do what it needs to do in your aquarium and build that bacterial biome is step number one. And then step number two is doing the same thing for the ugly phase. Don't fight that. Let the tank get through the ugly phase, build the bacterial biome and the microbiome necessary for that stuff to be used up and disappear all on its own. And then you need to start building a mixed bag of bacterial and microbiome right off the rip. Copepods and ostracods and amphipods and bristleworms and all of these animals that are going to build the base structure for what your reef tank is going to become later on need to be added to the tank at this time. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. You can manually add specific species by purchasing copepods and things like that, or you can get live rock from places like Tampa Bay Saltwater. Yes, they might come with some hitchhikers. It'll be okay. You can deal with those. And add that live rock to the tank. It's going to import tons of beneficial stuff into your aquarium. This tank is basically dead right now. It's through the nitrogen cycle, but there's no animals in it. Those are coming really soon, in a couple of days, by the way. We're going to have some fish in this thing. But biologically, it's pretty much a clean slate. So I have to get things in there, and that is the beginning base set for getting stability going in the tank. Another part of stability in our aquariums that a lot of people may not think is a thing that plays into it is your equipment choices and how you set them up and what you do with them. Let's just take a heater controller, for example. If you purchase a cheap, no-name brand heater controller and it has a plus or minus 3-degree sort of difference between when it kicks on and kicks off, that's too much. We don't want our tanks swinging 3 or 4 degrees every 24 hours as the heaters do their things. That is going to insert a little bit of instability into your system, which is going to compound with other problems. So you want to use good gear that's proven. Note, I did not say expensive, high-end name brands. I just said good gear that is proven to do the job well and be stable over time. And this is where a little bit of research comes in, because even though there are some inexpensive products on the market that I would recommend for reef keeping, and this video isn't about those, but they're out there, all the cheap no name brand stuff is not good or proven. So make sure you're going with names that you see repeatedly in all of the social media spaces where we talk about these kinds of things. Another piece of equipment that is often neglected when people are setting up a brand new tank is an automatic top-off system. Now, this introduces instability to the tank by way of you having to do manually top-offs on the tank, and it gets cumbersome and tiring and boring, and then you forget about it. We've all been there. I have 5 tanks right now that have to be manually topped off every other day, and it's driving me crazy. But I know what it's going to do if I don't keep up with that, and it's going to introduce that instability and allow problems to start happening. Lighting is a big one that I see a lot of the time where people are introducing instability, is because they just don't leave the lights alone. I need to do an entire video on this, on how you set up your lights and choose exactly where they're going to be. I have a video on coral lighting that explains all of the details about it, but I need to do one where I just set the lights up from scratch, and maybe I'll do that soon. I have a par meter here ready to go, so be on the lookout for that. And be sure you're subscribed to the channel, because you're going to want to catch that when I drop that video. Like, I just rolled that in there. That was cool. I'm impressed myself with that one. But my point is, you want to get your lights set to where they need to be and then leave them there. Don't go flipping and flopping and changing your lights all around all the time. Your corals will become acclimated to the lights where they are. So pick a spot that is somewhere in between having exactly the par that you need and also the coloration that you want to enjoy from your aquarium. Find a middle ground amongst that area, set them there, and leave them alone. Don't go changing them all willy-nilly. And this thing that I'm going to talk about now is probably one of the biggest forms of instability that we find in beginning reef keeping, setups and people getting started, and it's overdosing the tank. All kinds of stuff. People will recommend that you put everything in your tank, including the kitchen sink, if you talk to them long enough, and it's just not needed. You do not need to be chasing calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, phosphates, or nitrates for probably the first 6 months of the tank's life. Now, every case is independent, and some people are going to have to make adjustments sooner than other people. Case in point, if you set up a tank and you use Carib Sea Life Rock, right? It's not live rock. That crap is dead. They played that term because it's, flashy. If you use that stuff, it is well known that absorbs nitrates and phosphates for potentially months after you set the tank up. And if you have that stuff in your tank and you can't get nitrates and you can't get phosphates to show up on your test kits, this is why. That stuff is man-made, and it absorbs all of this stuff until it reaches a point of saturation. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and your nitrates are 10 and your phosphates are 0.1. And then you wake up the next day and your nitrates are double and your phosphates are double. It's because the rocks have sucked up as much as they can. And now you're seeing the reality of what the tank is producing. And this whole thing is all just an unstable situation. So how you set the tank up and the products you use and the equipment you use is also going to ultimately lead to how long or how short of a time you're going to have before your tank reaches stability. Along in with this is the products and chemicals that you use in the tank. If you're swapping salts all the time, you're introducing instability into the aquarium just from doing that. If you get Reef crystals this week and next week you get Red Sea Coral Pro, and the week after that you get Instant Ocean Purple because it's just what you found out there in the stores when you're shopping and you need some salt, that's introducing inconsistencies. All of those things have different levels of trace elements, and maybe even potentially things that we don't want, like filler materials and even some phosphates sometimes. So what you want to do is decrease as many of the variables as you can that are going to cause instability in the aquarium and remain consistent We as reef keepers need to be the most consistent part of our setup. We need to do the same thing at the same times unless something changes. And one of the huge things that I've seen here recently that people are just flat out getting wrong is calibrating refractometers. This is very important. You should calibrate your refractometer if you're using one to measure salinity. And we'll talk more about salinity measuring devices in another video. But if you're using a refractometer, it needs to be calibrated every time you use it. So if I was going to test all my tanks today, my first step is to calibrate my refractometer. And if I have a tank that's running at 82 degrees and one that's running at 78 degrees, I'm going to have to recalibrate in between them unless I have an automatically temperature correcting, that's the word, refractometer, an ATC refractometer. And we're going to do a whole video on this, but no, it is not correct to calibrate a refractometer with RODI water. I know some of them have that in the instructions. It is simply wrong. And I'm going to do a video talking about why very soon. What you should use instead is a calibrating solution that is set at 35 ppt, or even do some research out there on the internet. It's there for you to find, to make your own refractometer calibrating solution out of sodium chloride and some RODI water. There's a little more to it than that. So make sure you're digging into that and find all the information you need. But that's the best way to do it, because then you know it is correct on the salinity mark. Anyway, moving on. It's entirely possible to set an aquarium up and have way too much filtration in that tank right from the rip. You know, if you set up the tank and you're running a skimmer and you got a filter roller in there and you got biomedia bricks in there and you got other filter pads that are polishing the water on the way out, and then you're also running a denitrator and you're running GFO and you're running carbon and you're running Chemipure and you see where I'm going? All of that stuff is not needed when you set up a brand new tank. This 22-gallon sea cardinal that's just waking up here in the morning literally has nothing but some filter floss and a skimmer on the back. That's it. There's no Chemipure, neither Elite nor Blue, nothing like that. I'm not running carbon. I'm not running GFO. I'm not doing anything to this aquarium. And yes, right now it has dinoflagellates, but those are going to go away as the bacterial biome increases. At this point in this tank's life right now, what I'm doing is allowing it time to establish itself. We're 3 months in, and from about the 3 to 6 month area of the tank, it's going to be a bacterial hurricane. Things are going to be happening. Things are going to stop happening. Other things are going to be introduced. And all of this stuff is just going crazy, and it's unstable, which is why it's a little bit unhappy. But I need to leave it alone. And that's what I would recommend that most of you do for your tanks as well. Unless you have something that is an emergency, like your alkalinity is at 5, then you need to adjust that. But if your parameters are within the ranges of where they're supposed to be, don't be chasing them around too early in the tank's life. Let that thing do what it's going to do for a while. In order for you to have a healthy reef aquarium, you are going to have to feed the tank. So you want to make sure that you, the reef keeper, we are feeding on a consistent basis. You don't want to do 2 cubes today and 8 tomorrow and 2 scoops of pellets, Thursday, and then no pellets for the next week and a half. It is good to introduce a varied diet into your tank's, situation, but you want to be consistent. Feed the tank every day at the same time with about the same amount of food of whatever kinds that you're using, whatever mix you're going to be using to do that. Introducing that creates this sine wave like this of nutrient uptake and then degradation in the tank, and it builds a circadian rhythm in the ecosystem. The ecosystem becomes aware of when it's going to be nutrient rich and when it's not. And it'll speed up and slow down metabolisms according to the day, just like humans do. It's the same thing. We eat when we're awake, and we usually have a meal a few hours before we go to bed, and then we get tired and we go to bed and we don't eat while we're sleeping. It's the same kind of situation. But if I woke up on Tuesday and had a big steak for breakfast and then didn't eat anything until Thursday night and only had a shrimp salad, That's not going to be a good, healthy situation for me because there's no nice rhythmic flow of me getting energy and then releasing it and getting a little more and then releasing it. It's the same for your tank. So be stable with what you're doing. Along with that is all of your maintenance and your scheduled stuff. Make yourself a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, half yearly, and yearly routine for your aquarium with things that you want to check and maintain. You might end up finding a problem with something that wasn't there a month ago when you clean your skimmer this time, and that cheap pump that's inside that skimmer has a screw that's beginning to rust, for example, and you wouldn't have found that otherwise until it became a huge problem and you had to do an ICP test, and then that comes back high in zinc, aluminum, and whatever other metals are in those screws. So just make sure that your maintenance schedules and all that stuff are on a routine. You're taking a look at your tank every single day. Look for polyp extension, look for health of your fish. If you have a fish that's always usually out swimming around and suddenly he's hiding behind the rocks for a day or two at a time, something has changed with that animal, and you might need to dig into a little more into, what may be going on. Testing your tank falls into the same sort of scenario. You want to do it regularly. If that's, every twice a week or once a week or every 10 days, whatever your schedule is, do that on that schedule and build that history, which is going to help you introduce stability into your aquarium. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that I was going to give you 5 common instability traps, and here they are. The first one is going to be chasing numbers with constant adjustments to your aquarium. You do not want to do this. You want to let the tank, especially when you first set a tank up, you want to get the tank set up, get it going, get some fish and some corals in, and then leave it alone for a little while. Let the tank figure out where it wants to run with the pH. If from day one, you're buffering the pH to 8.3 because your local fish store told you to put this in the tank and it'll fix your pH, that's going to create a situation of instability where you don't actually know where the aquarium wants to run. I should probably make a video on this too. Somebody write this down or comment all the things I've said I'm going to make a video on in this video. Okay? Yeah, help me keep track of that stuff because I forget. Anyway, my point is you want to let the tank chill and find where it wants to be. This tank right now has nothing on it controlling pH, and the pH is steady at 8.0. This one back here, 7.8. My wine glass tank, 7.6. But it's rock solid at 7.6 and everything is happy. I don't have to do anything with it. I mean, I'm showing it to you right now on the screen, and I've got SPS and polyp corals and mushrooms in here, and they're growing and doing just fine. Don't introduce instability by trying to chase that perfect number. Now, we do need our numbers to be in range. Don't get me wrong. But if your nitrates are 5, don't try to make them 7. It's just, that's too much movement. It's too much adjustment. Okay, moving on. Adding too many animals too quickly is another part of the problem. You want to be steady with this. You want to add a couple of things this week. Next week, go get a couple of cleaners. The week after that, add another fish, and so on and so forth when you're setting up your aquarium. And you're going to see this progression happen as I'm doing this 210. Now, I do have a lot of stuff that has to go in here right off the rip, but we'll talk about that. But my point is, you don't want to get the tank set up, get it through the nitrogen cycle, and go to the store and get 10 fish and come home and put them in the tank. That's not how we want to do that. We want to be slow and steady over time, add an animal, let the tank catch up biologically, add a couple of animals, let the tank catch up biologically, and so on and so forth. Doing too much too fast, instantly, right then, as soon as you put them in the tank, there is a much heavier load on the biology of the aquarium, and everything's going to be scrambling for food, and inconsistency has been introduced. So go slow and steady with your additions. Oh boy, this is a good one. Reacting to advice without context is one of the worst mistakes that we can make in reef keeping, bar none. Example, you get online. You say, where should my phosphates be for my reef tank? and you find 5 threads on Reef to Reef. And the numbers are everywhere from 0.01 to 4.0. But nobody's saying why. Nobody's giving you the understanding of why they say that. I personally have a frag tank right now, the one you're seeing, and the phosphates are at 0.5. But I don't ever recommend that anybody run their tank at 0.5. This is just where this tank has decided to settle and be happy. It's usually much too high from a phosphate standpoint, and I've seen the degradation in color of these corals over time as these phosphates have been so high. But there's context behind that. I know what's going on in that tank and why my phosphates are at that level and why I don't want to mess with moving them around right now. But don't just set your tank at 0.5 phosphates because mine looks good. It's not going to work out well for you. Again, here, you need to find out where the tank wants to be. Okay. And once you find out where the tank wants to be and where it's sort of comfortable at, then if that's way off the mark, you can bring that closer into range by an addition of one thing at a time. And that brings me directly into my next point. The fourth key instability trap is adding or removing equipment all of the time from your tank. If you have a skimmer on the tank and it's doing a great job and your nitrates are holding steady at 8 ppm, but your phosphates are going nuts, it's not the skimmer. Let's just say the phosphates are at 0.01. You want to bring them up. We need to remove the skimmer and let the phosphates come up. Well, if you do that, your nitrates are going to go up too. Context is so important. That's just a hypothetical situation, but you want to make sure that you're understanding the why behind every single change that you're going to make and why you're making it in the way that you're going to make it. Right? I hope all that made sense. I'm not sure if it did. I'm trying here. And the last one, the fifth instability trap, is using chemicals in your tank to fix problems instead of fixing them with biology. Now, that is not always possible in every scenario. Sometimes we have to put a thing in the tank to help the tank get over something like bryopsis. One of the only things we can do for that is use fluconazole, FluxRx, in the tank. But that's not always the case. Cyanobacteria is a huge one, okay? And we see it every day in every forum that we're all on. Somebody posts a picture and there's a little spot of red cyano in the corner. There's going to be 200 people right behind them that says, dose it with ChemiClean. That's a mistake, in my opinion. Now, of course, I could be wrong, but I've seen what happens when you dose a brand new tank with ChemiClean. You're going to end up with dinoflagellates. It might be a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks down the road, but it's coming. You just wait. But I digress. Overdosing a tank with additives to fix a problem that could otherwise be fixed by letting the tank mature a little bit, letting it get where it needs to be before we start adjusting all this stuff. It's about 6 months. That's the key, okay?